Hello, and many thanks for joining us on this edition of the program, People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marere. During the just concluded governorship elections in Ekiti and Osun states, and before then, the party primaries, particularly those of the two big political parties, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the All Progressives Congress, APC, there were widespread allegations and even glaring financial inducements of voters and delegates. This brings to the fore the urgent need to conclude all legislative actions on the Electoral Offences Commission bill, which has been pending in the National Assembly. The Senate passed that bill and forwarded it to the House of Representatives for concurrence since July 2021, almost 1 year after the House of Representatives only saw it through a second reading on June 30, 2022. The bill, when and if it becomes law, will empower the Commission to investigate electoral offences, prosecute electoral offenders, and maintain records of all persons investigated and prosecuted. It also prescribes a 20-year jail term for persons found guilty of snatching ballot boxes during elections, amongst other electoral offences. The legislation also proposes that any candidate or agent who damages or snatches ballot boxes, ballot papers, or election materials before, during, and after an election without the permission of the electoral officials in charge of the polling station shall be jailed for 20 years or fined a sum of about 40 million naira. Proponents of the bill say it has become imperative in view of the Independent National Electoral Commission's inability to prosecute electoral offenders in accordance with the provisions of Section 149 and 150 subsection 2 of the Electoral Act. Now, there is no doubt that electoral offences remain a major threat to credible, free, and fair elections in Nigeria. Electoral offences, including vote trading, amongst others, are committed with impunity for the simple reason that the law is blind to them. In some instances, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has stepped in either to nip vote trading in the bud or arrest perpetrators involved in the act. Yet, this does not appear to deter politicians engaged in the unwholesome electoral malpractices. A civil society group, SERAP, has even gone to the extent of dragging the Electoral Commission to court to compel it to prosecute persons arrested for vote trading during the last Ekiti governorship election. Now, as the nation heads to the 2023 general elections with expected high-wire politicking and scheming, the Electoral Offences Commission may just be the perfect way to cushion the effects and fallouts. But those opposed to the proposed piece of legislation argue that it will be one too many, as there are sufficient extant legal provisions in the country's statute books to effectively deal with electoral offences if the will to do so exists. Now, with the tenure of the current legislative and executive arms gradually winding down, and as campaigns take the center stage, with the Electoral Offences Commission bill, which also provides for a special tribunal, be another piece of abandoned legislation? Or would the lawmakers pass it and leave it behind as a befitting legacy? These are some of the issues we'll be looking at on the program today. When we return in a short while, we shall meet our guest analysts. All right, time to meet our guest analysts. I'm joined in the studio by Barrister Sam Kargbo. He is an electoral reform expert and activist. Thank you so much, Barrister, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And also joining us virtually via Zoom is Mr. Kolawole Oluwadare. He is the Deputy Director, Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. He's joining us from his base in Lagos. Okay, he will be joining us in a short while, but Barrister Kagbo, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for staying with us.
Yes, please.
Right. The bill in question, that
yes.
is the Electoral Offences Commission bill,
yes.
has been long in the making. And so far it has spent over a year, about a year, in between the Senate and the House of Representatives. Many had thought that this bill would have come into being much earlier than this, considering the fact that it was the Justice Ways Commission, or rather a panel, that first suggested the establishment of an Electoral Offences Commission to take the burden of the Electoral Commission itself, which should be saddled with just the conduct of elections. And again, there was another panel that was set up by this same administration that was headed by the former Senate President, that also reaffirmed the need to set up this commission. But as we speak, with just about 8 months or so to the next general election, there doesn't seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel.
I am hoping that very soon we would get it, because just like you said, and incidentally I was involved in the making of the white paper for the Justice Ways Electoral Reform Commission. And why do we really need that? It's not something that you really need to overemphasize, because the integrity of the election is dependent on the conduct and activities of all the participants in the election. And that is why, if you take a look at the framework within which the electoral offenses are created, you see that even they themselves, who are the legislators, have taken up the time to line out almost all the participants in the election, and for each one of them, starting with the voter himself, right up to the administrator himself, the political parties, and the security agencies, and even the media. For each and every one of those participants, they realize the importance of their being a kind of a code of conduct that would in itself enhance the process. There is hardly anything that INEC can do for now that would assist the process in prosecuting electoral offenses, because the time within which they have to manage the post-election crisis and the management of the election, you find that most of the time the 4 years duration is not enough for them to actually do all that the Electoral Act has assigned to them. So it was for that reason that they said, you know what, for us to actually have an effective management of the prosecution of electoral offenders, let us have a body which is specialized and would have the manpower and the focus to ensure that all those who are involved in electoral offenses are charged and prosecuted and punished, for that matter. We've never really had, I don't think my memory can produce anybody in the near or past that has been actually prosecuted and jailed for electoral offenses. And yet, almost every election throws up all sorts of manners of electoral offenses. The idea of leaving the participants themselves to go and slug it out at the Electoral Tribunal in itself has no help, because they do not have the capacity and the ability to actually process the activities that are criminalized and espouse them at the electoral tribunals. One would have expected that if indeed we are serious about what we are doing, and we are hoping that we can actually use the electoral process as the foundation for our aspiration for accountability and good governance, we will be serious about prosecuting electoral offenders. So,
according to INEC records, in the 2015 general election, there were quite over 870 electoral offences that were committed, and offenders that were actually prosecuted, or no, that were recorded. But I think only 200 of them, of that number, of that 870, were prosecuted. But whether or not they were convicted is another matter. In 2019, that figure was for 2011. In 2015, there was an increase. Over 900 other electoral offenders were again recorded. But up till as we speak, there is no record of anyone that was prosecuted or convicted. And then, of course, in 2019, and then in the off-season elections, we have had a number of other such electoral offences that have been tracked and recorded. In fact, some of the security agencies have records of some of these electoral offences and offenders that have been fingered, yet no one has been prosecuted and convicted. And so this has given some fillip to those who continue to perpetuate electoral offences across the country. Now, what does that tell us? Why is it that the lawmakers appear to be foot-dragging on the passage of this bill?
I think the fear is that of the proliferation of agencies. But I've always had this feeling and belief that there is actually no limit to which we can spend on ensuring that we enhance and deepen democracy. We are saying that if we did not control the conduct of the participant in the electoral process, we undermine the essence of the election itself. Election is the foundation of accountability and legitimacy of governance. If the electoral process does not enhance public confidence, if the electoral process in itself, by itself, take away public belief in it, then obviously we may not have what we call good governance, because there is a correlation between our belief in the system and the tolerance that we have for the system. If we do not believe that candidates and personnel of governance who pass through the electoral process are our own choices, and if we do not believe that the process is transparent and fair, there is hardly any way we can believe in the government itself. So sometimes when you see the gap between the governance system and the public, when you see so much of this apathy that in itself is not helpful to the governance process, it is because the foundation in itself is weakened. And which is this foundation? The election. If the election is not seen to be credible, transparent, and effectively managed, then obviously what are we saying? The foundation is weakened. So I am hopeful that very soon we'll go to the basic and really start retracking and calibrate ourselves to focus on the issues that are key to the management of the public space. We are here saddled with almost every sort of problem, societal problems, and yet we do not see the relationship to the electoral process. The laws are there, obviously. In the present 2022 Electoral Act, I think there are about up to 15 or 16 sections all criminalizing all sorts of behavior and actions during elections, even including INEC. But yet, like you said, you said INEC said they prosecuted up to about 200 cases.
In 2011. That's after the 2011 election.
How many of us know that? And mind you, the essence of prosecution or the criminal justice system is not just about punishment. It's also about sending a message to would-be offenders, deterrence. If you do not bring that process to the notice of the people, how would you be able to deter those of us in the public who have tendencies to actually commit those crimes? Let them relate their actions to the essence for which those actions are being made, which is what? To give credibility to the electoral process.
Let's go back to the Electoral Act that you just made reference to.
Yeah.
The fact that the new Electoral Act, the 2022 Electoral Act, seems to provide some of the provisions contained in the 2021 bill that is still in the National Assembly, is the basis for which those who are opposed to having the Electoral Offences Commission and Tribunal have argued that, look, there are enough statutes in our law books to deal with these offences, and therefore there is no need to have a separate commission, a separate tribunal to try these offences. Now, if this is the case, how do you then justify why we should now have a new commission and a new tribunal, a specialized tribunal, to try such offences?
Let me start with the law itself before we go to the institution to manage the law. The entire provisions there, I think the stiffest penalty for all the electoral offences is that of procurement of a fake ballot box, which is about 50 million and 10 years. For almost all the other offences, including offences that are committed by INEC officials and electoral parties, political parties.
And even judicial officers.
No, not judicial officers. I'm talking about within the process itself.
Okay, yes.
The prohibited actions and the punishments that are assigned to them. The stiffest penalty is that of the 50 million or 10 years or both. All the other, is it 12 months, 2 years, 50,000, 500,000. What does that mean to a political party? For an example, campaign finances. You are talking about campaign finances, limiting campaign finances, and the essence of that, you know, and you put a penalty of about how much? 5 million? A political party can afford that.
Even an individual
an individual can afford that. You understand? So let the law in itself be serious with itself so that we start from there. Because even if you bring managers to manage it, an institution to actually manage it and have the bite, at the end of the day, the provisions there, the punishment, are they deterrent enough? I do not think so, because we all know why people are desperate and why they go into the criminalities that we are talking about in the election. It's because the stakes are high. Public office is the best investment in the country, and if you scale through it, you know you are made. And therefore, if the risk is low, but the returns are high, I damn the risk. So now coming back to the need for the commission, it's not so much about the law being there, but who activates it, who manages it, who executes it, who gives it the bite. It's what we are talking about here. We are saying INEC is too overburdened. It has too much on its hands. And in any case, there must be an independent body to oversight the oversighter and oversight the manager of the process itself. Mind you, we are also saying that there are acts there that constitute crime or offenses that are speaking to INEC and its officials. If you leave it to INEC, you expect INEC to start criminalizing itself and start punishing itself? I do not think so. But if we have an independent, real hard-biting body, INEC in itself would see straight. Political parties themselves would comport themselves. Candidates would comport themselves. And of course, their followers who are the individuals who disrupt elections, who themselves forge election results, would be checked. So definitely we need a hands-on body that would by itself build capacity, knowledge for both the investigation and management of the prosecution of those crimes. INEC does not have that. It does not even have the time to actually build on that, because INEC's principal focus is that of conduct of election. And the crimes that are to be committed during the conduct of election are themselves limited. Mind you, there are a number of crimes outlined there before, during, and after the elections. But INEC's focus is on the election. But what we say, it is not just about conducting the elections, but it's about you, by the conduct itself, and then their confidence in the process. You must be seen to be doing things that are not only ethical, but within a code of conduct that by itself would generate the confidence that you need. Because if the electoral process does not by itself throw up its own believability factors, then you have a problem. If the election is managed within, I repeat, a code of conduct with global standard ethical principles, obviously, irrespective of the challenges that it's had, the public feeling will say, oh, they've tried their best. Because in any case, what the electoral offenses that are prescribed in the Electoral Act are meant to do is to sieve out all of those actions, behaviors that undermine the integrity of the process. Because without the integrity of the process in itself is undermined and its purpose is defeated.
So, is there some truth to the belief in some quarters, for instance, that it might be foolhardy to expect politicians, and politicians in this case, I mean the lawmakers themselves, to want to put in place these kind of law and regulations that would hamper their intentions in manipulating the electoral process?
Let's give it to them. I don't think it's that bad, because they know for certain that no matter how clever they are or how lucky they are, they won't be there forever. In any case, for their future, they need to have what? A peaceful environment. Environment that what? Promotes development. And if they've been given the opportunity to make laws and regulate the behavior and actions of individuals, I do not see the benefit of making laws for their own benefit. I do not think so. Because even if you say, look at where they could even have had a self or tendacious lawmaking, they outlawed themselves in that process, which is the primaries. Outside the primaries and during the election, at the electoral booth, irrespective of your origin, even if you were Mr. Senator or you were President of the Senate, you're going to queue there, among others. And don't expect that you have more money than others, or you have more muscle than others, or you have more tricks than others, or you are more desperate than others. If for anything...
outlawing themselves in the primaries was, some would say, fortuitous, was not intended. They probably didn't take enough care and enough to look at the details of that bill well enough to prevent what happened. Because if they did, they would have known that this was going to happen to them.
I would want to give them the benefit of the doubt, because that provision by itself was reasonable and was justified within our own context. Mind you, the law is meant to regulate an environment and its people. And experience has taught us that that law was necessary. And very many of them would come. I see in the near future whereby the lawmakers would have the courage to say, you know what, for the good of this country, let's make a law that will limit the number of times that lawmakers can come into office. That could come. Because in any case, you are going back to this same environment that we are. Mind you, you hear them speak against insecurity. And the reason is simple. Insecurity has no class boundaries. If for anything, the higher you are in the class, the more attractive it is connected to you. So very soon, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They'll be making laws not just for today, but for tomorrow. And like I am saying, if we want a good Nigeria, a good tomorrow, and want to have an accountable government system, and want to have accountable public officers, want to instill the principles of legitimacy in governance, obviously the legislators would see to it that they act within that spirit and make laws that would achieve that.
Do you think that this law, if it eventually becomes law, that this bill, it eventually becomes law, is capable of enhancing public confidence
Yes.
in the electoral process?
Yes.
Against the backdrop of what we have seen in the past, law or no law, and how actors in the political process have been able to undermine the system, undercut the system to do what they want to do and achieve their goals.
You see, we have to start from somewhere. Usually, you know, most times we defeat our aspirations by looking too much at the negative sides of things. Let's have this agency, and let's be hopeful that the agency, the recruitment system within the agency by itself would enhance its capacity to do its job. Believe me, it's not just the politician who is already in office, but anybody who has put out himself to make a living out of politics that you now call the politician, because in any case, all of us are politicians. But I think the politicians we are discussing here now are those who are making a living out of politicking. No matter what law you put, they are always ahead of you, because that is their life. Their energy, their thought process, their time is put on studying the hurdles before them and how they can what? Surmount those hurdles. The same way you develop capacity within your own profession as a journalist, it is the same way they also develop themselves to surmount hurdles, negatively or positively. So if you have, like we have here now, institutions whose actions are like what I would call fit and start, you are always going to be behind them, because they don't blink. For them, it's a 24/7 process and attention to that process. They would always want to beat you at that game. But if you would have an institution that would actually study this, study the sociology of political crimes, the psychology of it, and build up a team that would prevent that and manage it or curtail it or minimize it, so be it, it's good. Because look at what is happening here now. Ordinarily, a police should be a police for 24 hours. And therefore, wherever you are taken, irrespective of the assignment that is given to you to that place, if you see a crime, it's your duty to arrest, because that is your duty as a policeman. The policemen are there at the polling booths, at the polling stations. They are always there. But they look the other way to say, oh no, we're not here for that. We're here to what? To ensure that that process is not disturbed. And when they say that process is not disturbed, perhaps snatching off the ballot papers and the ballot boxes. And sometimes they cannot even prevent that. But if the electoral process builds in this from the word go, the personnel or the agencies that they are taken there are not only going to be observers, but are going to be what? Agents who are going to prevent or minimize this. They are talking about what is happening. You saw people around, or you're seeing people around buying boats. What prevents you from arresting those people? You expect the individuals to do that. They can't, because what? They don't have the wherewithal. Because even if they do, they would have to hand over that person to you. But you are there. So assuming the process itself has this inbuilt mechanism to prevent or reduce this, the number of personnel that are going there are going to go there in categories. Those who are going to be watching and manning the polling station, and those who are what? Going to manage the environment to ensure that what? None of these electoral offenses are committed.
All right, we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll continue our discussion on the Electoral Offences bill, which is pending before the National Assembly. All right, thank you so much for staying with us. My guest is Barrister Sam Kagbo, and we're looking at the imperative of the Electoral Offences Commission law. It's still a bill at the National Assembly, and with just a few months to the 2023 general elections, there is a school of thought that believes that that bill should become law early enough to ensure that there is accountability during the 2023 elections. By Sakabo, there is also this argument by those who think that the Independent National Electoral Commission has introduced a number of innovations in elections in Nigeria. They seem to have introduced a number of digital processes that has helped to facilitate a smooth run of the process. And therefore, for any Electoral Offences Commission that wants to function side by side with the electoral body to be successful, it must also be high-tech.
Definitely.
It must have what they describe as digital forensics to be able to not only catch, but investigate and successfully prosecute those that will eventually be prosecuted for any form of electoral offenses. At the moment, is the country in that frame of being able to put together such digital forensics, digital high-tech processes to carry out such responsibility?
Definitely.
Against the backdrop of what we are currently experiencing, the insecurity in Nigeria, where there is always a constant cry, constant demand for resort to artificial intelligence or all manner of high-tech to combat the insecurity that is getting worse by the day.
Yeah, definitely. You're even overemphasizing that aspect of it because it's imperative. Let's take, for example, the American system. The FBI has a specialized department for monitoring the elections. And most of the time, they even give data on early warning signs as to tendencies that would affect the smooth running of elections. Most of the time when we see the election run as smooth as it is, we think it's self-piloted. No, there are systems mechanisms that are assisting the process to give you that sort of free-flowing process that you want on election day. Let me emphasize this point. INEC is, and the election day activity or process of the election, the entire electoral system itself, is just what? A quarter or a fraction of what we are talking about. Let us start with the management of the activities of the media houses before, during, and after elections. There are offenses there that are targeted at the behavior of media houses. There are offenses there that are targeted to corporate bodies, political parties, candidates, sponsors. All of this, you need to have a body with specialized personnel that will be able to look at each and every one of these sectorial offenses or segments of the listed offenses. So what does it really cost for you to have the sort of high-tech technologies that you are talking about? In any case, we all are alive to the relationship here between what? Insecurity and the electoral process. Most of the time, it is the lack of legitimacy of governance that in itself plays out in the forest in the form of what? Dissenting behaviors. Believe me, if all of us believe in the system and we think that the system is fair and legitimate, we'll be curbed with our what? Criminal tendencies. But we are here day in, day out crying about what? Lack of what? Good and effective governance. And yet, we are talking about what? Pinching. And what? Saving costs. About processes that would what? Enhance the foundation of the governance system. I do not see that Nigeria should spare any kobo at all in ensuring that the electoral process is credible, transparent, and effective. We need that. Let's start from there. And if we get it right in our election management system, we will get it right in our governance system. And if we get it right in the governance system, we'll get it right in what? Governance services. There is a relationship between all of these chains. There is a correlation between your electoral system, your electoral process, and its outcomes, the governance system.
Now, given what you said before about how overburdened, as it were, the electoral management body is at the moment, does it stand to reason why certain civil society groups are at the moment dragging the body before the law courts to say, to force them to say, prosecute those that were arrested at the just concluded governorship, off-season governorship elections, instead, for instance, agitating much more strongly for the passage of this Electoral Offences bill?
If you have that institution that is separate from INEC, it makes your duty, your work easier. Mind you, every citizen has the right to compel, to ask the court to compel a public officer to do that which he is supposed to do. You can go to court and ask for a mandamus to say, I know that this gentleman, this is his duty, and yet here is an activity that he's supposed to attend to and is looking the other way. So it is not just for NGOs. There is that feeling that when you are an NGO, what do they call them, civil society, it means your duty is over and above that of the citizens. No. All they are doing is to aggregate our civic responsibilities and assume them. But you don't need that collective, you as an individual, to ensure that public officers deliver on their mandates. That is the civic culture. And it's a question of civic culture. And I've always said so. Your tolerance of public inactivity, public infractions, is directly proportional to the quality of governance that you have. Because it is your tolerance, it is your inaction that gives them to Philip to do that which they are doing. If we do not encourage corruption, we can nip it in the bud, because individually and collectively, we don't need public institutions to ensure that if you leave my backyard today, as a struggling man as I am, and you become a councillor, and tomorrow I see you reeling in money, I have every reason. It's my business to come and say, hey, give account, where are you getting that money from? That is why Western institutions seem to be working. When they say, oh, strengthen the public institutions, it's not by giving them laws. It's by support by the citizenry.
So in the absence of an established law, such as the Electoral Offences Commission law, for instance,
yes,
and in the absence of an INEC that is unable to prosecute those that were, for instance, arrested during the off-season governorship elections for electoral offences, can any other body or individual go to court or prosecute those that have been apprehended, for instance?
Of course, the police are there. The Office of the Attorney General cuts across every, no matter what offense, no matter what institution that you give to manage certain set of offenses, that office has the overriding power to intervene. They can, but they themselves are overburdened. Let us don't shy away from this.
So if we keep making the excuse for them that they are overburdened, it means that we are letting offenses and offenders go scot-free.
Do you know how many policemen that we have? We have less than 1 million policemen to police over 200.
I think
people.
Just a little over 300,000.
Fine. Is that not laughable? Seriously, that number may not be able to manage a city in some other places. There is that inherent criminal behavior in people. There is always that tendency to do that which is prohibited. So, we need, if you ask me, as many as about 2-3 million policemen to police our streets and highways effectively. We need more than twice that number for the military, for us to attend to security effectively. But we always shy away from the issues and start dressing them up with distractions. Go and spend all the money in the world and buy arms and ammunition. If you don't have the men and officers enough to use those arms and ammunition, you will not get security. No matter what laws you have against all sorts of behaviors, if you don't have the men and officers to police them, it will go to naught. So, let me emphasize, we need that body, we need this law, so that we go back to the basic and ensure that what? We give legitimacy to governance. Let the public officer know that he is there on the grace of the people. if he has that ingrained in his mind, he will behave, he will perform.
In this situation, Barrister, in the situation, for instance, like the Ekiti governorship elections, where certain persons were apprehended by the security agencies and have not been prosecuted, about a month and a half after the election, which is what Serap is talking about now. You have apprehended these people. Some of them caught red-handed, sharing money, trading in votes, and all of that, and all manner of other electoral offences. They have not been prosecuted, and nothing has been heard about them. Shouldn't the Attorney General, as you have rightly mentioned, be more interested in getting this done, in prosecuting this individual, as you put it, deterrence to all others and for all other elections that will come up?
Yes, but is it, when we say the office of the Attorney General, I'm emphasizing the office. It comprises not just the Attorney General himself, but the staff that make up the office. And he is the solicitor to every government agency in the country.
Mm-hmm.
He is the counsel to every public office in the country. And you aggregate that and ask the question, how many men and women does he have to carry all of this duty? What is our annual budget? Have you gone through the annual budget of that office? Have you gone through the annual budget of the Ministry of Justice? So most times we want magical outcomes when we by ourselves have actually manacled the offices that we want those magical outcomes from. You cannot get anything effectively done where you don't effectively put money on it. It is money that talks. It is money that does the job. The human beings are just what? Vehicles of that money. We are putting money in the wrong places. The things that we need to put money to and ensure that we give the good foundation for our governance system, we are what? Over speaking about them. Seriously? There is nothing as important in the life of a nation than the electoral system itself. Because everything we are talking about here is what? A product of the electoral process. Because it is that process that are going to what? Give you your leaders. If we do not ensure we put in inbuilt mechanism that will make sure that give or take, no matter how bad it is on the average, we will get what? Average performance from them, we won't.
Okay, Barrister, very quickly, in the final analysis, are you very hopeful that this bill will pass through the National Assembly and be sent to the President for assent to become law before the 2023 general elections, enough time for the commission to be properly set up to carry out the mandate that the law prescribes for it?
I can only be prayerful but not hopeful. I don't think it would happen. The ladies and gentlemen, they are preoccupied with their political lives. And you see them getting distracted with issues that they know they won't get public sympathy from. But the life of Nigeria is not just the life of today we are talking about. Let's hope for that. Even if they don't do that, the next batch of legislators will see that, will see to it, and let us have that. That's my own prayer.
Thank you very much. Barrister Sam Kabgo is an electoral reform expert and activist. He's joined us on the program today to take a look at the Electoral Offences Commission Bill, the imperative for it to be passed into law by the lawmakers in Nigeria and assented to by the president before the 2023 elections. It's a few months to the elections, and it appears it's a long way to go for this to be effectively done and for it to make any meaningful change in the 2023 elections. Thank you so much, Barrister.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And for your viewers there, please, we thank you immensely for joining us, and we ask you, you can view this program anytime. Go to our social media handles, and of course, you can contact us and respond to some of the issues that have been raised on the program. Bye for now.